Alright, so I'm going to show you here what this string trimmer is doing when you try to give it some throttle. It'll idle fine, but you can't give it any throttle whatsoever without it shutting off. Happens every time. As soon as I start giving it throttle, it just dies. No matter how fast or slow you go with the throttle, it just won't do it. Now it will run at high speed when you got the choke on. I'm gonna turn the choke on like I was starting it up for the very first time. You'll see that will pull enough gas to get some speed up on it, but as soon as you touch the throttle on this model, the choke turns off. And that's what we got going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the carburetor off of it and see about doing a little cleaning. Then we'll see how it runs. Alright, the first step in taking the carburetor off this weed eater is to undo the little thumb screw there, take the air filter cover off. Then I'm going to pull the air filter out. And then the carburetor is held on with 2 bolts, which also holds on the back plate to the air filter housing. This is a Torx 20 bit, so I'm just using a screwdriver to undo these 2 bolts. Once I get those loose, you can just pull the carburetor away from the engine. I need to undo the throttle cable, so I just twist it and then lift up on that little bent hook. Knock your bolts out. And then grab yourself a pair of those pliers, because we're going to use those to get the fuel lines off. Just kind of pry it away from the carburetor. Here I forgot to take the pressure, relieve pressure on the fuel tank, so I'm going to just loosen the gas cap for a second and then go ahead and push the line off. Still squirted a little gas out, not too much though. Pull the black line off. Just remember where your lines go. I'm going to remember that the black line goes near the black housing, and now what we'll do is get this black air filter housing off and get the carburetor cleaned up a little bit. I took the carburetor and sprayed some degreaser on it and then washed it off with a water hose to get some of that filth off of the outside. Dried it off with a little shop towel. Now I'm taking the 2 screws off of the diaphragm side of the carburetor. This is a ZAMA carburetor, and it's a model C1U. Those will be handy things to know in case I need to buy a rebuild kit for it later on. I've got the little cover off. Now that's the diaphragm and the gasket. It's a little stuck there. Trying to get it up with some needle nose pliers, but it's still stuck in the corner, so I'm gonna see about getting a razor blade to get up in there and pull that off. I'll go ahead and take off the bubble, primer bulb. It's 4 screws holds that down on this side. Then I'll be able to remove that part of the carburetor. Now there is some dirt in the screen right there. The left hand side of that screen, you can kind of see it right there. So when I get that out, it's definitely going to help how the carburetor gets gas to the engine. Okay, now I've got a razor knife and I'm going to use it to pry up the diaphragm and gasket from the carburetor. Just do it carefully so you don't cut or tear the gasket or the diaphragm. Once you got that loose, just lay it over to the side. As you can see, there are lots of small passages and holes in this carburetor. A lot of places for it to get clogged up. On this side, that's the primer bulb. Primer bulb just fell off, but what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take this upper layer off. I'm not going to worry about getting that whole gasket off of there, because mainly what I need to do is spray out through those holes, and there are about 4 places on that piece that I need to spray out with the carburetor cleaner. Yeah, one right there, one right there, and there, and there. Now I'll do the same thing with all the holes on the carburetor. Now I'm going to spray out the carburetor pieces. Got a can of carburetor cleaner with the little red tube on it. I'm sticking it up to these holes in each piece of the carburetor here and just spraying it out. Be very careful when you're doing this, because you may not know which way that hole goes through the piece of the carburetor, and you may wind up squirting it back in your face. I'm trying to be very careful here so I don't spray it on my camera. The camera is probably only about 10 inches away from the work surface here. I've sprayed out all the holes on the little piece that holds the bulb on, and now I'm spraying out the holes on the carburetor. I'm just shooting a little bit of carburetor cleaner through each one. Gonna spray off the little screen that acts as the filter inside the carburetor. Again, I'm sorry I'm blocking most of this with my hand, but I was trying not to spray carburetor cleaner on the camera. Alright, just shook off some of the carburetor cleaner. Now I'm going to just dry it off with a shop rag, wipe it down, and it's time to start putting it back together. Hopefully this will do the trick without having to spend any money on a rebuild kit with a new gasket and diaphragms. And the other option would be pulling out the needles in it, which I did not do in this video. I didn't think it was so far gone that I needed to do that. It was still cranking very easy and idled very well, just couldn't give it any throttle. Once you get that piece on there and lined up, you'll want to hold it down kind of tight so you don't let the gasket slide out of place. And put the bulb back on. It's got 4 screws there, So just start you a screw in one corner and tighten it up by hand, and then start you a screw in the opposite corner and tighten it up by hand. Then you'll be able to put the other two screws in without having to hold everything together. I just use the bit when I'm doing something like this instead of a screwdriver, so I'm not fumbling with a big screwdriver while I'm working on a tiny carburetor. Now I get the screwdriver and we'll go around this twice, tightening these screws to make sure I've got them evenly tightened and tight but not over tight. Again, you're using fine thread screws in an aluminum carburetor, so you don't want to strip them out and tear up your carburetor. That'll be an expensive fix. Now remember, when you put your diaphragm back on, that little metal disc goes down, and so it pushes on that little valve, lets the gas through. Line everything up, and then put your two screws back in there. And again, I'm using just a bit until I get them snug. And then tighten each screw equally. Like I said, I usually tighten each one twice, that way I know it's even. Pump seems to be working. I could hear air going through it as I was pumping it. So that's everything back together on that. And I'm going to pull the weed eater back over and start reassembling this. I'm going to put the fuel lines on. Remember, black was supposed to go closest to the air cleaner, so I'll go ahead and put that on there. And then the clear blue hose goes on the other inlet. Line up your air filter housing. Grab the top bolt, slide it in. Line it up on the motor, or the intake. Tighten it up a little bit. Grab the bottom bolt, get everything lined up for that to slide through, and hand tighten it. Put your Torx bit in. Tighten these two screws equally. Don't over tighten them. Don't want to strip them out. Just make sure they're nice and tight. Now fix the throttle. Just rotate the throttle with your finger. Turn that, stick it through the hole, and then let go of the throttle, and everything's hooked up. So air cleaner is not really dirty, so I'm just going to wipe off some of the loose stuff and put it back in place. Put on the air filter cover, snug it down. This particular model says to pump the bulb 10 times, then flip the choke on. So that's what we're going to do, and see if it will start. Pump the bulb. Rotate the choke to the on position. Pull the cord and see what happens. Move it back over just a little bit. So that did the trick. Weed eater is now running great. It cost me about 20 minutes of time and a little bit of carburetor cleaner. All I needed was some basic hand tools, and I got the job done. You can do it too. Thanks for watching my video. Have a great day.